Although Nigeria has been generating electricity in commercial quantities for over a century, the pace of electricity infrastructure development in the country is very slow and power supply remains highly inadequate. According to a recent report from the World Bank, epileptic power supply has cost businesses in Nigeria about $29 billion yearly, with a fast expanding population of about 27 million people. Lagos State receives an average of, let's say, 1,000 megawatts of electricity. But in line with the theme's agenda, the state government is set to establish, its own electricity market to ensure more reliable power supply in the state. The plan, if implemented, will be the first in Nigeria where energy generation, transmission and distribution is overseen by the central government. To give us more insights into this development and of course more, I have joining me the Lagos State Commissioner for Energy and Mineral Resources, Mr. Olalere Odusote. Thank you very much. Good afternoon to you, Mr. Odusote.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon and thanks for having me here.
Yes, first, I read this quote. It's impossible to have a sustainable economic plan without energy plan. I'm looking at the theme's agenda. Very interesting document, very interesting initiative. Now, where is energy playing that part in making all of this become a reality? Tell us the role energy will play in all of this and what you're doing.
It's underlying everything we try to do is energy. And I think energy can be thought of in a lot of different ways. Energy is just energy. Energy is the power to do things. So if you want to achieve anything in our themes and agenda, the underlying support that it needs is the availability of the energy to do it. So for us, we started by situating energy in when we talk about the themes agenda, the M part of it, which is making Lagos a 21st century economy. We looked at the economic drivers of Lagos and put them under the 21st century agenda. And energy, or electricity, if you will, is certainly a key factor in that. When the EPSRA was passed in 2005, which was supposed to lead to the revolutionization of the Nigerian energy sector, and certainly not just deregulation, we all thought that in a few years' time we would have the energy we need. We don't have that. We've looked at the EPSRA. Lagos has on its own been trying to intervene in electricity for many years with varying degrees of success, and I think it has come into its own now. Lagos is able to regulate its own market, create its own market, and manage it to the outcome that it desires for Lagosians.
Let's now look at in-state electricity or electric power stations and aggressively driving stronger volume of investments in the power sector, especially independent power projects. Are you doing anything around that?
So let me try and revolutionize the thinking around the power sector.
Okay.
The easiest of the value chain in the power sector is generation. So that's where you see a lot of people gravitating towards. They say we always move towards the path of least resistance. So far, generation has been that. So much so that we now have an abundance of generation in Nigeria. I was speaking to the managing director of the NDPHC, who has under his charge, according to him, about 4,000 megawatts of generation, of which he's only able to evacuate 750 megawatts. That leaves him with about 75% of his capacity undispatched. That's not a good state of events. So in Lagos, we're looking at the market, trying to understand what the market needs, and then trying to divert resources to that area of what the market needs. And from our findings, it's in the distribution sector. That's where we have the bottleneck. So if NDPHC wants to wheel 3,000 megawatts of electricity and it can't, it's because there are bottlenecks in the sector, both transmission and distribution. So in Lagos, our first priority is to look at where the customer interfaces with the network, which is with the distribution system. And once we've got that sorted, then we'll start to look at the rest of the value chain, which would be the transmission sector as well as the generation sector. Generation is certainly important. If there's no power to deliver, then there's really nothing to deliver. But if we cannot deliver them through the channels that exist, then what's the point of building additional generation plants? So yes, we will be looking at generation as well, but the generation we'll be looking at in the near term would be the off-grid generation solutions, which today is for the most part really just the solar systems that we have. We're going to organize it and make sure that it's applied to the areas where it's needed the most.
Well said. I also see you've signed a lot of agreements. There was one with USAID. A lot is being done to develop an electricity plan or electrification plan, if you would like, for the state. I'm also looking at metering and other challenges. I think that also has to do with distribution end. Are you doing anything to also increase manpower or to improve that capacity so that we reduce importation? Maybe we can do something in country.
Oh, we certainly are. We have partnerships with major meter manufacturers in Nigeria, and we're training people. We started with MOMAS a few months ago, where we trained a number of people to start on meter installation. We're currently in another partnership with another of them, which is Mojek. We're looking to train 1,000 Lagosians on meter installation as well, such that when the meter rollout starts, we will have people who are actually able to participate in the sector and who will be gainfully employed in Lagos as well.
Okay, very good one there. Now, with the current electricity architecture, the need to establish, control, manage, extend, and develop new electrical networks, as well as develop or extend existing ones. To me, it looks like a necessity for a state like Lagos. Can you take us through what do you make of that? Do you also toe that line of my submission?
All right, so I'm going to try and answer your question in a couple of different ways. First of all, the role of the government is limited to, primarily to policy development and policy implementation.
Okay.
What we will try and do is craft policies that will encourage the private sector to come and invest in the areas that we've identified, and also encourage them to focus on the near-term areas as identified by the government, and then as we start to stabilize the market, to start to invest in the other areas. So what we will be doing, we'll be formulating and implementing policies that will encourage investment in the sector. And as you rightly mentioned before, we're working with a lot of our international partners to take best practices from around the world and apply them to Lagos.
Now, we know what's happening at the national or the federal level. Gas. It's all about gas at the moment. It's a gas decade, according to the Minister of Petroleum Resources. What is Lagos also doing in regards to, particularly at this time, let's say LPG? Are we doing anything, cylinders or anything that will make life more easier for Lagosians? You know, our population, it's really alarming.
So it's interesting that you say LPG. LPG is an area that's extremely that we find very important in Lagos, especially when we look at the environment. For us, it's really about the environment. Today, about 65% of Lagosians that cook at home use biomass, i.e., charcoal or wood. It's surprising to a lot of people when we say that, but then when I give you the numbers, it might unsurprise you a bit. In Lagos, in Nigeria, our per capita consumption of LPG is 1 kilogram. Let's compare that to our next door neighbor, Ghana, which is about 4.5. Let's move further along to Senegal, which is about 9 kilograms per capita. And let's then go to North Africa, to Egypt specifically, where it's 88 kilograms per capita. You'll see that we have a long way to go in Nigeria. So what we've done is we've incentivized our agency, Ibile Oil and Gas, as its mandate, its primary mandate is to improve the penetration of LPG, especially in Lagos. So what they're doing this year is they're going to start the development of 5 LPG plants across the 5 divisions of Lagos, which is Ibile. What we expect that to do is to bring LPG closer to people. In addition to that, we're going to be carrying out a lot of advocacy to encourage Lagosians to move from biomass to start cooking with LPG. We're also encouraging LPG distributors, but in different forms, to incentivize them to reduce the barriers to entry for a lot of people, which is the cost of the LPG cylinders, by making them available on a lease-to-own basis or even on a straight-lease basis, such that the ownership of the cylinders does not rest with the people who are using them, but with the suppliers of the LPG. In that way, it's cheaper for you to get into the LPG train, and then you realize very quickly that it's much cheaper for you to burn LPG than it is to burn biomass and in the form of wood and also charcoal. Now, the interesting part of that is it's cheaper not for you, but also for the government. The amount of illnesses we have for respiratory illnesses will reduce significantly, and that will free up our hospitals to deal with more important cases. So on the health side, it's beneficial. On the economic side, it's also beneficial. And the fact is, LPG is produced in Nigeria. So what's the point of exporting a product when you can utilize it to make your economy a lot more sustainable back at home?
big question. Why do we even flare gas? That's one of the things that worries me. But let's not go that route at this moment. I'm now looking at, before now, we used to hear of IPPs, a little bit of generation in Lagos. I think some of our hospitals, some schools were under that network. I want you to tell us what's happening with regards to that. Where do we stand with regards to that at the moment?
All right, so when it comes to electricity, I'm going to take that as a broad question and then give you a sense of what it is we're doing in Lagos. We've had a Light Up Lagos program for a while. Light Up Lagos does not just mean public space lighting. It also means lighting. It also means lighting up homes. It also means lighting up our public infrastructure. It also means lighting up our public spaces, which is where you see the street lights. We're currently in the process of revamping the street light architecture in Lagos. We have 1,200 kilometers of street lights, of which, if you ask people, they'll tell you about a third of them are functional. What we've done is we've started a program which by the end of June will see all 1,200 kilometers of those street lights retrofit in the A and B areas with very bright LED lights, which means that we're able to then develop a 24-hour economy. That's on the street lighting side. On the rest of the electrification, we've gone ahead with the policy development. What we expect to do now is to create a Lagos electricity market. What a Lagos electricity market will do for us is to ensure that the Lagos market is developed in a focused area. Now, since we started the revolution, since we started the regulation, the national electricity sector, we have not seen the change that we expect. And we believe that that's because the electricity sector is being managed remotely, meaning Lagos has to queue up with 35 other states at NERC and also at the federal government level to seek for development for Lagos. What we want to do is to take that away, is to stop queuing up with other states and chart our own costs, create our own electricity market, create our own systems operators in that electricity market and start to demand for our own generation as we need them, and then also start to improve and incentivize investment into the distribution sector, such that in the near future, in not too far distant future, when you go home, you will switch off the light and it will come on, and you won't have to go behind your house to start your own IPP. So we expect that when we start to look after our own backyard, then we'll get the improvement that we want.
That takes me to the Lagos Electricity Board. I remember that, expected to generate, transmit, and maybe distribute electricity to access areas not covered by the national grid. Can you take us through some more of the successes in this regards of areas of coverage and where we are and where we're still going to be?
In terms of the interventions of Lagos State, let me take you far back again to when Lagos State supported the establishment of the Enron IPP. Lagos State supported it, and the Enron IPP came to pass. At that time, the federal government was managing the electricity sector, and as such, we didn't have direct control of everything that went on. The Enron badges came, later became the AES badges. They did supply the power into the grid, but Lagos did not get the volume that it wanted directly injected into Lagos because we didn't control the sector. A few years on, we started with LSEB, as you rightly mentioned, to promote the development of 5 IPPs. What these 5 IPPs were supposed to do was to support public infrastructure. So they were going to support the street lighting effort. They were going to ensure that Alausa, the water works, and other such public agencies were supplied with electricity with a lot of success. Some hospitals were also connected. In that, around about the same time, we also installed about 213 schools and private healthcare centers with solar power, with some serious successes in that as well. What we're looking at now is expanding that success into the public space. Now, for us to be able to do the same thing and not go through the same issues we have with Enron, we need to manage that space. Because again, this is Lagos. Lagos consumes 25% of the energy, at least, that's distributed in Nigeria. And Lagos accounts for, depending on who you are, 70% of the economic activity in Nigeria. So we need to do things a bit differently. And so we've started out supporting the center with the Enron. We started out, so we then went on to supporting the public infrastructure with the IPPs that we caused to be developed. And now we're looking at the entire Lagos and saying, why don't we leverage the experience we have for self-help and also national health and apply it to Lagos. If we can focus our energies here, then we think that we can achieve the electrification we want in Lagos, as well as the stability and regularity of energy that we desire.
Now, how do we employ more cost cost-cutting measures to spur the power sector and create power regions to service key sector hubs, especially for businesses with huge energy demands?
Today, the big industries with huge energy demands are at a great cost supporting themselves. What we want to do is to ease that cost of supporting themselves and create a more business-friendly environment in Lagos by ensuring that the grid is able to support them. This we will do again by regulating the sector, by ensuring that the system is able to charge cost-effective tariffs. Now, another good thing about this is that the Nigerian electricity supply industry today is not as efficient as we would like it to be. We believe that if Lagos had its own market and its own supply system, it would be more effective. And the cost-reflective tariffs that we're talking about, when you juxtapose them against the inefficiencies that we have today, the tariff should not be a problem. So when I say cost-reflective tariffs, what happens is people usually get scared. What that usually means to a lot of people is high tariffs, especially when you hear that the industry is not self-recovering and is still being supported by the federal government. In Lagos, we would not need that support because we would have a more efficient system. It will be a focused regulatory system that's not looking at 36 states, but just looking at one.
Let me quickly follow up on that. The discos, yes, you just talked about that. They have liquidity issues. They have a lot of challenges at the moment, and you need them. We identify them as, some even say they're almost the weakest link. So how are you going to work this out? You're a more professional in this. So tell us, how are you going to synergize with them to actualize your own aims?
So it's interesting when you say the discos are the weakest link. I don't think of it as such. The discos are the business end of the electricity supply industry. They are. They're where the tar hits the tar. That's where the consumer sees the industry. It's at the disco level. So the discos cannot fail. The discos failing would mean the entire system has failed. So the discos are not weak. They're actually quite strong. What we want to do is make them a lot stronger by ensuring that they're able to recover all of the they're able to recover from the customers all of the energy that's supplied, And we believe that we can do that working closely with them. Fortunately, in Lagos, we have two discos that are almost entirely dedicated just to supplying energy to Lagos. If we can get them, if we can support them to fully recover, then we believe that the sector will be that much stronger.
Indeed, liquidity issues is one of the major things because they keep getting support from the central bank and government. Let's wrap up with what more should we expect. 2020 has been a challenging year. But as we move on in 2021, COVID seems to be getting better, but we still need to maintain distances and wash our hands regularly. What more should we expect from your ministry? Moving on, Commissioner.
So we're going to be doing a lot more, both in the electricity sector and the oil and gas sector. Like I said, we're currently in the process of developing our policy. We've sent out the consultation document, and we've been receiving significant amounts of support in terms of commentary and in terms of valuable interventions that they think we should be looking at. We'll also be looking on the oil and gas side at our clean energy initiative. Okay. We'll be looking at deploying more LPG plants. We'll be looking at supporting the federal government by looking at the vehicular market in Lagos, which also contributes to the emissions that we see. We'll be looking at ensuring that we're able to convert cars. We're also looking at ensuring that we're able to get the fuel that's needed to refuel the cars that are converted from the dirty fuels such as diesel to LPG and CNG. We'll be looking at that. We're also doing quite a bit of local capacity building, like I'd mentioned before. We'll be training a lot of people on the electricity technologies that are needed both by the discos and also for the metering program and also for the expansion that we envisage. We will also be, I expect that we'll publish our electricity policy before the end of the second quarter of this year, and we will be passing a bill to the State House of Assembly. Also in concert with the national bodies, national regulatory bodies, we'll be in discussions with them to ensure that we fashion out a law that will help Lagos rather than hinder Lagos. The community electrification program will also be going ahead. We've got support from the AFDB to identify pilot communities. We've identified 6 of them. We've been working with the GIZ, that's the German Development Agency, to evaluate. We've completed the evaluation of 6 pilot zones, and we'll be looking to the funding from AFDB and the state government to implement those pilot zones and turn them into lighthouses, if you will, or beacons of hope, where everybody will look at those areas, see that they are served with constant electricity and want to be like them. So what we intend to do is light up Lagos one community at a time, starting with those pilot zones this year.
Well, very good. And we'll be here for you to also come and bring us up to speed as you actualize all of these aims. Thank you very much for your time, Lagos State Commissioner for Energy and Mineral Resources, Mr. Olalere Odusote. We appreciate this. We don't take it for granted. Enjoy your Friday and your weekend.
Thank you for having me.